This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga, Birth, Babies, and today we are talking about maternity leave, how to navigate it, negotiating hospital bills, hiring a nanny, and paying that person on the books, off the books. We're going to talk about that, and lots of details that may be overwhelming to some during this huge transitional time in their life. So to have this conversation, I reached out to Alex Berke. She is an employment litigator and provides advice and counsel on sexual harassment and discrimination cases, including pregnancy, disability, race, and gender discrimination. Alex spearheads the Berke-Weiss Law's Pregnancy Project, providing pregnant women and families with the necessary tools to exercise their rights during and after pregnancy. So important to know what your rights are and how to get what you deserve. So we talk about so much, even including how to get a breast pump, how to negotiate these huge bills that you may get. So much great, juicy information. Before we get to that, just a few things. I just want to say thank you for those that have left a rating and review recently. I've noticed the numbers jump and that's exciting. And if you haven't, please take a moment to go to wherever you're listening to this from, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever, and leave a rating and review. It's so appreciated and it helps other people find the podcast. What else is going on? So teacher training well underway. That's exciting. We still have some space left in the winter session at Willow Street Yoga. And then we have some spots left in the New York City one in the spring at Prenatal Yoga Center. And then over in Richmond, Virginia at Yoga Source. So you can check that out at our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. And you can just go to the teacher training page. And then for maybe those that a whole teacher training seems a little overwhelming or you just don't want to go down that path, but you want to have the information to support the pregnant people in your class, Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi? It's a 5-week or 5-session self-guided online course that you can take, and you get the 5 continued ed credits from Yoga Alliance. You can check that out at who'safraidofthepregnantyogi.com. It's a new course. I'm so proud of it. It's really fun. Okay, before we get to the conversation with Alex, just letting you know I'm recording this around the holidays, and it always makes me think of family and gratitude. So I just want to take a moment to express my appreciation and gratitude for your listenership and for the PYC community. I feel like I have a whole fresh new beginning in our new space, and we see the community continuing to grow. And it is so exciting, not just the community in our 4 walls, but the listenership keeps growing. The teacher training keeps growing, where we're bringing new teachers to new communities. And it's just so exciting to see the growth and the work, because it really is about serving the pregnant person and the new parent. And I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful that you're there listening. So thank you. Okay, we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Alex about the Pregnancy Project. Enjoy.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hi, Alex. Good morning. How are you?
Good. Hi, Deb. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you. So I found you while looking through social media, of course. And when I saw what you were doing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to explore this. The pregnancy project sounds amazing. So I guess let's just jump in. Tell me, before we get into that, just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Thanks. Well, as you might have figured out, I'm a lawyer. I practice labor and employment law in New York City and in the Hudson Valley. I'm also a relatively new mom. I have a 17-month-old son, Miles. I started working on the pregnancy project before it was relevant to me, but knew that it would be eventually. And yeah, I work at a small firm with my mom, Lori Berke-Weiss, who happens to be a longtime labor and employment lawyer, and my colleague, Rosa Aliberti. And I kind of went to law school with a vision of doing social justice work and had a focus on health insurance and public interest work. And sort of, it worked out so that the office needed me at a time where I was looking for my next gig. And so I sort of fell into the employment world and have been really enjoying it.
That's great. So tell me a little bit about what is the Pregnancy Project?
Yeah, so we and our firm saw over time, Lori has been practicing for 30 years and Rose has worked with her for 11, though been a lawyer for the past 2. And, we see things happen time and again. And it's interesting because in the past year or 2, I think pregnancy discrimination has actually been in the news and been discussed. But even prior to that, we saw that it happened a lot. And people really didn't expect that they would be discriminated against because they're pregnant. It's the 2010s and women feel generally pretty powerful. And so there's always this sense of shock. So between their experience in employment law and my experience in health insurance, where I was helping women, sometimes women who were pregnant or just had children, deal with these massive medical bills, and understanding that a pregnant woman or a new mom really doesn't want to deal with the stress of all of these outside forces, we thought, well, what can we do to educate people so that they might know what's going on before it happens to them, before they're in crisis, or at least know kind of what questions to ask? Because I think some of the stress is can be misplaced or can kind of get worse and worse because people don't really know where to turn. And it's not as simple as just Googling, what do I do? Because there's kind of a web of laws and questions, and it's always very fact specific. So that was kind of the genesis of creating the Pregnancy Project. And the goal of the Pregnancy Project is just to, like I said, educate women and families about their rights so that they have a general understanding of what they can negotiate for in the workplace and when they really should seek outside assistance.
And also the maternity laws have changed. It was a couple of years ago in New York now and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I will be honest and I will out myself that I work for myself. So I never had actual paid maternity leave, because I work for myself. And my husband actually just graduated grad school 2 weeks before my son was born. So he didn't have maternity leave for our first. And most of my teachers only worked maybe 3 hours a week. So they didn't qualify. So this is brand new to me. So I'm just trying to figure out, things did change a couple of years ago. Didn't something get passed?
Yes, things have changed. And I think, it's new to a lot of people. So in 2018, New York State began to offer paid family leave. And, just a little bit of background. In America, there is no federal right to paid maternity or paternity leave. There is a federal law called the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, which people, I think, have a general familiarity with or might have heard about. But that law only offers a protected unpaid leave period of up to 12 weeks. And it only applies to people who've worked for about a year at their employer and their employer has 50 or more employees. So that leaves a lot of people out. So what we've seen over the last few years is different states and Washington, D.C. and some cities as well, launching in and offering their own paid family leave programs, which are more expansive and create an opportunity for people to actually access some pay, not through their employer, but through an insurance program.
Right. The first time I encountered this is I had a teacher recently give birth, and I didn't understand. I knew I had to fill out paperwork, and I thought I had to pay. And I realized that I was later told, like, no, the insurance that I have pays her, and it's really money already taken out of her check, which also surprised me. So can you break down how the New York state laws are around maternity leave, and how do companies accommodate this, and what do the employees have to do?
Yeah, those are great questions. So even having gone through it, it can sometimes be a little bit confusing. So basically, employers, I think this started back in 2017, New York State employers with any number of employees. So you can have one employee, you can have a nanny, and that nanny is entitled to New York State paid family leave if they've worked with you long enough. And what happens is the employer has to have an insurance company, and generally, if you have workers' compensation insurance, sometimes those insurers offer this policy as well. So you have to sign up for the policy and then take deductions from the employee's paycheck to cover the policy. And it's not as much as health insurance. It's capped at a much lower cost, I believe. I should know the number off the top of my head. I don't, but it should be like less than $5 per paycheck. I think potentially much less. And the idea is that when someone is thinking that they're going to need paid family leave, which you can take, the idea in New York is that it's for the care of another. So it applies when you have a child, when you adopt a child, if your partner has a child, if you foster a child, but it also can apply if you have to care for a sick family member.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
This podcast is sponsored by Skylight Frame. Mother's Day is almost here. What are you getting her? Something that shows you care. Something that makes her feel loved. Something that won't stress you out. Something like the Skylight Frame. The Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. It's a touchscreen photo frame your whole family can upload photos to, from wherever they are in the world. It's a way to share with her all the moments that matter. It sets up in seconds. You can even make sure that it's already loaded with photos when your mom opens her Mother's Day gift. And her Skylight Frame can hold thousands of the treasured photos you share. It's an easy, heartfelt way for mom to stay connected with those who matter most. It really is the perfect gift. Now, as a special Mother's Day offer for our listeners, get 15% off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/easy. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/easy. Get 15% off your Mother's Day purchase now at skylightframe.com/easy.
So you have to give the employee gives the employer some notice, theoretically, if it's planned, up to 30 days notice to apply for paid family leave. And there is paperwork through the state that and also through the insurance company. So you have to kind of coordinate with the insurance company to ensure that you're providing the right information. And then once the insurance company approves the claim, they pay the employee.
Yeah, I just remember there being a lot of paperwork. and my
It
biggest
is a lot.
and my biggest concern I always want to make sure is that my employees, my teachers have put that aside. So if they know they may need to use this. So how can we make sure, all business owners or employees make sure that for those that want to make sure the money's coming out of their paycheck, that it is, they make sure they talk to their employee and make sure it's coming out, or is there something on their check they can see?
So it should be listed on your pay stub the way that all taxes are listed, your state taxes, your city taxes, and whatever else is being taken out of your pay is listed on the pay stub. So should your contribution to paid family leave.
That's good to know. So let's talk about when you suggest an employee inform their employer they're pregnant, because I know I will again say in my line of business, we're a prenatal yoga center. We welcome that. But I could imagine in other corporate worlds, because I've had students say no one else knows yet. I haven't told my employer. I can imagine that being tricky. So what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely tricky. Well, I'll start with a very lawyerly answer, which is to say that it's completely fact specific. So there's no one answer about when someone should tell their employer that they're pregnant. What people should know is that there isn't a requirement. It's not like you have to tell them by a certain date. Although if you're taking paid family leave, there is a 30-day notice period. So I guess technically that would be the notice that you have to give. Generally, when we talk to people about when they should inform their employer, the kinds of questions we're asking are, well, do they need to know? So if you're having a complicated pregnancy and you are maybe seeing a lot of doctors, or you might need some reasonable accommodations, which are basically small changes to your work that allow you to continue working at your position, then you might want to tell an employer soon. Sometimes people tell their employers before they tell their family. But generally speaking, there's no reason to tell your employer very, very early unless you are going to need to make a change to your schedule, or they should know so that they are aware that they shouldn't be discriminating against you because you're not late to work because you're, a bad employee. You're late to work because you've had morning sickness.
I'd also imagine if it's physical labor for some jobs that at some point they shouldn't be lifting something so heavy or being on their feet for so long. Is there anything, and pregnant people are protected under this, so they should, I'm assuming then the employees can work around that, or the employers should work around that, correct?
Yes. So pregnant people are protected under a variety of laws. And under the law, pregnancy is considered a disability. And I know that some people bristle at that, but the idea is that you are supposed to be protected to basically say that you can't necessarily do everything that you've always done, and let's make a reasonable accommodation. So what's a reasonable accommodation? This is a term of art in the law, and it essentially means that an employee needs to be able to perform their essential job functions. So if the kind of classic example is if you're a pilot and then you become disabled and you're blind and you can't fly, then there might not be a reasonable accommodation for you to continue being a pilot. But if it's a question of shifting your work hours, or maybe you can't lift, but there's another position that doesn't require as much lifting, it might be a reasonable accommodation to switch to that position. Now, this process of requesting a reasonable accommodation from your employer, there's something called the interactive process. So in the ideal situation, an employee makes a request for a reasonable accommodation, and the employer discusses it with them. They don't have to offer you exactly what you ask for, but they do have to explain to you why they can't offer what you're asking for, and talk to you about other potential changes that could be made. Now, this can be very fraught and can kind of be a heads up to an employee that their employer is not, is potentially discriminating against them. And that is, I think, a reason to reach out to a lawyer because there are so many ways that conversation can go. And if it's not going well, it's good to kind of tap an expert to talk through what you might want to do as the employee to advocate for yourself.
No, that's important to hear because I can imagine also people being nervous then to even talk to their employee about this, their employer. They're afraid they're going to get fired and be discriminated against. I had some other questions about moving on to hospital bills because this is something I've had a lot of friends talk to me about. Is there anything else before we shift gears about maternity leave, paid maternity leave, time off, that whole part of the pregnancy project you want to comment on before I shift?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I do want to add that, as a lawyer, I recently had a client who was like, you're the first lawyer I've ever met. And I forget, because obviously I'm surrounded by lawyers, that lawyers can be very scary. But I just want to point out that calling a lawyer doesn't mean starting a lawsuit. Sometimes we operate in the background and we just advise our clients on how to advocate for themselves and what they should be kind of getting documentation of. So I just want to be clear about that even if you are having concerns about your employer and you contact a lawyer, that doesn't mean that the lawyer has to contact the employer. It might just mean that you kind of get a sense of, is this right? And I think that can be really worth the investment of time and potentially paying for a consultation because it eliminates a lot of questions. I also want to say in terms of leave that some companies and businesses do have their own maternity leave that they offer. Sometimes people do offer paid leave, and employers will have a handbook, and the handbook should include this information. And I know that employees often don't know where the handbook is, don't want to ask because it kind of tips their hand that they need it. And I just want to say that it is useful to look at, but that the New York State paid family leave, exists. And if you live in a place other than New York that has paid family leave, those laws will be outlined for you and they should apply regardless of whether the handbook spells it out. And New York State actually offers a really great New York State paid family leave website that has a lot of information for employees and employers. That's a great resource to look at to understand your rights.
Perfect. I'll include that in the show notes. I'm writing a note of that right now. New York State website, perfect. Family leave. Perfect. Great. So those that listen and they want to know what those specific laws and protocols are, they can find that out. Good. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. All right. So this is something, because I teach both pre and postnatal, so I hear all of it. And what a lot of people come back talking to me about is a very surprised, much more inflated hospital bill than they were expecting. They have insurance. A lot of them have insurance, and yet they still have these enormous bills. First, maybe why, but I don't know if you can answer that. But how can people negotiate, or what can they do when they receive these bills from their insurance company?
Yeah. So yes, bills can be negotiated. I think, there's a lot of issues with our healthcare system. I don't have to tell anybody that. But one thing to keep in mind is that unlike other bills that you receive, like your grocery bill or your internet bill.
I mean, Fairway's not going to negotiate with me?
Yeah. I mean, there's not one price for the cost of medical care. So it always depends on who is paying. Is a private insurance company paying? Different insurance companies negotiate rates with hospitals. And if an individual has to pay, then the hospital might use the highest rate. And there's different kinds of protections around that. But I think bottom line, you should know that yes, you can negotiate a hospital bill. And the goal for anyone who is in that position is you don't want to ignore it, because that might end up having the hospital send the bill to a debt collector, and that might impact your credit. But you also don't have to pay it right away. You might have access to hospital financial assistance. In New York State, there's a financial assistance law that has to do with the amount of income that your family makes. And you might be able to negotiate on that basis, or you can certainly negotiate a payment plan. So that's something to consider. And in New York, there is a resource called Community Health Advocates that offers free assistance to all consumers in New York State. And I'll give you their phone number as well to add into the show notes, because people can call them and get help with negotiating their bills. Now, another thing you mentioned is, what about with your insurance company? I know that it's very confusing when people get a bill, because you don't really necessarily know where it's from. So the first thing that a person should do is really understand, who is billing me? Is this the doctor? Is this the hospital? Is the insurance company saying that they're not covering something because it wasn't medically necessary, or a doctor was out of the insurance network? Or is it actually just that, the insurance company paid everything that it has to, you have a big deductible, and so you owe the hospital a certain amount of money? And I think that's really the first step, is understanding, what are you faced with? Because if it's something, you might be able to appeal to the insurance company, and Community Health Advocates helps with that as well, to say, no, actually, insurance company, you should be paying for this service. Or it might be that you actually are liable, but you just have to negotiate the amount.
That's so amazing to know, because I've had bills that come in, and honestly, it didn't even occur to me that I could appeal them. I'm just like, okay, I guess I have to pay this now. And it does seem a little insane that if you're with, your insurance is supposed to cover a certain doctor, you're in a hospital, but another doctor sees you. How are you supposed to ask and find out at that moment if that other doctor is covered with your insurance, or what the insurance is going to deem medically necessary? If the care provider is saying, hey, we need to do this, you're assuming that the care provider is saying that, so it is medically necessary. So it seems like it gets really messy and hard to navigate in the moment.
Absolutely. And I think, New York State has passed a surprise bill law. And again, like paid family leave, this is a piece of legislation that's popping up in states around the country. And the idea is, of course, you can't ask a doctor if they show up at your hospital bed if they're in your network. They might not even know if they're in your network. So there are protections for consumers who do find themselves with a surprise bill, and it's kind of the onus is put back on the hospital to explain and to notify people.
And it's called the surprise bill law?
Yes. And just because it's a surprise to you doesn't mean that it fits the characteristics protected in the surprise bill law, but it is something to know about and to look into. So,
okay, because I'm kind of loving, first of all, the name and that there is such a thing. So what would be... I like to imagine going legislation. We're going to pass a surprise bill law. So what would be covered under that? Since we're saying you can't ask at the moment, and it may, even though it may be a surprise to you, it may not fall under that. So what would fall under that?
So again, being a lawyer, I want to say I don't necessarily know all of the details right now, but okay. I will say, generally speaking, the classic example that has pushed these surprise bill laws into action is, what if you're in the hospital and the anesthesiologist isn't in network? You have no choice as to who they are, but they show up. You have to have the surgery. Maybe you're having a C-section, and, you need these services. So that's the classic example of, you're in a place that is in network and somebody out of network sees you. Another example is if you are in a place that's in network and you're sent to get blood testing or some form of testing, and it's down the hall, but down the hall doesn't mean in the same network. That's another thing that is protected.
That is so confusing. You're right. Our healthcare system is just, yeah, it's just, I'm boggled by this, and I feel fortunate. I haven't really, knock on wood, I really haven't had to deal with this, but it just seems so overwhelming. And especially as a new parent, you're just, and you have a 17-month-old, you're trying to just navigate getting through the day and keeping everyone alive and functioning and trying to enjoy this. And you may be dealing with the headache of, oh, I didn't know this person wasn't insured by it. It just seems so overwhelming and so unfortunate.
I agree. And I think that, coming from the experience of being an insurance advocate, an advocate for consumers, I was concerned that I would kind of lose it during my own delivery, being obsessed with, is this going to be covered? What's that? And of course, what I didn't realize is, luckily, you're very focused, and I wasn't really able to think about those things. But I also think that there, as ridiculous as this seems, you can't always get the answer in advance. And so I think that it's not worth thinking through that when you're in the moment getting the care you need, because there's work that you can do afterwards to deal with the bills.
I will say, I could just imagine some people now hearing this being like, they're getting like a new anesthesiologist, be like, what are you covered? I actually did have a client when I was a doula. She had a resident. So she had the attendant coming in to give her epidural, and she let the resident do it. And the attendant was just watching. Before the resident started, she's like, where did you go to school? Tell me about yourself. I was shocked. I'm like, you're in very active labor. You were literally about to get a needle. They're cleaning your back, and you're asking where this, I mean, knowing the client, I wasn't surprised, but it did make me laugh. So I can now imagine certain people, as this is happening, they'll be like, wait a minute, are you covered by your insurance?
That's really funny. Yeah, people, people have all sorts of reactions to all sorts of things. So I'm not surprised to hear, especially in New York City, that someone would be questioning
where they went to school. All right. So I'm going to shift gears again. Is there anything before we move away from insurance companies you want to cover?
I will just share a brief story, because there was one thing that I did become obsessed with. So, in New York, you are entitled to see a lactation consultant. Yay. And my insurance company didn't have a lactation consultant within I think it was 90 miles of me. And as people who've been through this know, when you need a lactation consultant, you need them now. And you need them ideally
yesterday.
In your yeah, you're not getting your baby in some car to drive whatever, or get on the train to go see somebody. So I knew that this was a violation of the network adequacy laws, because insurers are supposed to have an adequate network. They're supposed to have people within a certain area that you can see. And so I did find a lactation consultant. I paid her, I think it was $250. And then I tried to fight the insurance company about it, because I knew that they were violating the law, and how ridiculous that, they're supposed to be offering this. But of course, I had my newborn strapped to me. I'm like on the calls, I'm trying to write letters. And eventually I thought, this isn't worth the $250. And I will admit that I gave up. So I tell this story because, I think there is a lot that you can do to advocate for yourself, but also at a certain point, I think of the insurance company like a casino. The house always wins. That's their job. And so, you can fight the fight, but sometimes if you don't want to fight the fight, maybe just it's okay to move on if you can afford to.
Well, that makes me think about breast pumps. And I love that breast pumps are now covered by most insurance companies, or maybe even all. I'm not sure. I know when I had my kids, they weren't. In fact, the second one might have been, but I already had one from the first. And they're expensive. So how does one obtain a breast pump? And do we know if all insurance or just some insurances cover that?
Yeah, so this was through the Affordable Care Act, required that insurance companies provide breast pumps. So it should be that all insurance companies offer them. And as with everything in the healthcare system, it depends. So the question of how do you get it depends on your insurance company. So you have to go to your insurer and ask what their process is and fulfill it. So you can't buy a breast pump and submit for a receipt. Different insurance companies contract with different providers to ship you breast pumps, and they offer different breast pumps. So if they don't offer a hospital grade one, you might be able to argue or appeal to them that they should offer you a hospital grade breast pump. But again, it's the question of, is it worth it, and how hard do you have to push?
So you don't get a choice. It's just you somehow ask for it and something gets delivered to you?
You get a choice within what your insurance company.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So like the different insurance companies might offer different brands. So if you want a Medela, but you can only get a Spectra through your insurance company, they're not going to give you a Medela because you want it.
Got it. Okay. Now, I'm glad at least a lot are supporting that, because it's expensive getting a breast pump. And for working parents, it's a necessity. It's not a necessity I loved having, but I had to have it. And as I'm sure you might have had to too. So, breast pumps. It's still the sound of it. The sound of my Medela still haunts me to my soul.
I agree. I was not sad to leave mine.
Yeah, to retire that. All right, let's shift now to hiring help. And this, I don't know. I'm going to ask some questions, and I know you're a lawyer, so I don't know if how you'll answer this. There's the on the books or off the books question. And I know as a lawyer, you probably have to be like on the books, but I know so, let's just put that out there. But let's address the fact that many, let's just use the word nannies, could be other things, but let's say many nannies don't want to be paid on the books. I encountered several myself when I had my kids younger. How do you work around that? And I guess so let's start, how do you work around that? Because I know legally they should be on the books. And then if they are on the books, that means payroll and all of the above that you talked about as an employer. And this is something I was thinking about, because we have these in my yoga studio, the labor law posters. Like, does someone that has a nanny that's on the books, they have to have them in their kitchen? So tell me.
These are great questions. So you're correct that as a lawyer, I can't advise anybody to operate off the books. But I also recognize, and I had this myself, people don't want to work on the books. Now, the reason, I've had people come to me and say, well, I agreed with this person, we have a contract and we agreed that they were off the books, but now the state is coming after me. Well, the state doesn't care if you agree with somebody to break the law. The law is the law. It doesn't matter what you choose. And the potential repercussions, again, lawyers, we always like to deal in risk, is that there are, if you do not pay properly, so you don't have the correct wages, you're not paying overtime, you're not doing the correct breaks, then somebody has 6 years to bring a claim against you for unpaid wages. And that there is an entire industry of lawyers who take those cases for free because they do get attorney's fees and there are damages, and they can bring those claims. Now it's a very awkward situation. You're hiring someone to be in your house and care for your child, so you don't want to think that it'll ever go bad, but it also might just be as simple as somebody applying for unemployment when the job is done, not really understanding that they don't have access to unemployment because they weren't paid on the books, so you were not making contributions to the unemployment insurance fund. And that can trigger the state to ask a whole lot of questions and send you a pretty big bill for what you should have paid.
Do a lot of people, how does the state find out besides the someone filing for uninsurance? Because I know a lot of nannies that don't get paid on the books. So how would that even come to light?
I think that it would generally, I can't answer specifically because I don't know all of the reasons, but what I've seen is if somebody applies for unemployment, or sometimes if the employer is doing their taxes and there's some question. So I don't know that that would necessarily be how nannies are found, but the state, all the different divisions of the state and the IRS speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's possible for a question to pop up. I know that New York State, I've seen it more when an employer believes that they have independent contractors and the state believes that they have employees. And you should know that a nanny can never be an independent contractor. They have to be an employee. So sometimes that's how the question arises.
Interesting.
No, so, of course, yeah. I'm sure, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sure there are plenty of people evading this law, but these are the repercussions if you are found.
All right. And then I know it's a silly question, but do they need the labor law posters? Like, do they need like a handbook? What is one that is doing the on the books? What's there besides the... Let me see, what do I do for my employees? I have the compensation. I've got some sort of insurance. I have a handbook and the laws. Like, what do people need that at home for a single employee?
Technically, you do need to provide them with the labor posters. You do need to provide them with notice of their rights, for example, for paid family leave. You should be providing wage notifications. It gets really detailed, and actually the Department of Labor does have some good resources explaining what you should do that I can share with you as well.
Yeah.
But also, so it does, I think the most important thing is you want to have a nanny filling out time cards, because you do want that protection of, if there's ever a question later, to say, I have records, here are the records.
Oh, I never thought about a nanny filling out a time card. Huh. I will say I'm glad. Let's just say I'm glad I'm past that world.
Yeah, I will be, very honest that I did have a part-time nanny for my son's early life. And honestly, it is, as somebody who does this work and had other options other than a nanny that fit my life, I feel much easier putting him somewhere where somebody else is dealing with these questions.
This is super helpful. All right. So now we're wrapping up this question. Is there anything you want to, I have so many questions, but I'm loving this. This is really interesting. I hope the community finds it interesting too. Is there anything on the hiring help that we need to continue with that I didn't ask?
I think it's just a question of really understanding, what you are supposed to do, and finding a payroll processor, finding an accountant who knows how to do this, looking up what the requirements are, and trying to abide by them.
Oh, this is a question I had. I had kind of a friend of a friend that had some babysitters, and they were just kind of sporadic babysitters. But what I heard is when the new babysitter came, she handed her a tax form. Does one need that with just like a date night babysitter? Or can they be independent contractors because they're not committed to a certain amount and they can take or not take the hours you're offering?
Mm-hmm. So this question of whether someone is an employee or an independent contractor, there's at least like 10 areas that the state looks at to determine whether that's the case. I will say that, one key thing, as you highlighted, is, does the person do this work for other people? Do they control the work? So obviously the person seeking a babysitter is looking for someone for a specific time. But if the babysitter can say no and they babysit for multiple people, I think there would be a good argument that they're an independent contractor.
Okay, that's good. I have to admit,
I will say that I use babysitters. I hope I don't come to regret this, but I use babysitters as independent contractors. But you can't have a nanny who is also babysits. Like, just because one person sometimes also babysits doesn't mean that they can be an employee one day and an independent contractor the next.
Okay. Interesting. So you can have your you can have your nanny, and then if you're like, hey, nanny friend, can you do extra hours Saturday night when we go out? That would still be in the employee, even though it's beyond. Would that be overtime then?
It might be overtime, depending on how much they work. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, this is so confusing. That's why I'm glad we're breaking it all down. Okay, we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask for one tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new or expectant parents. Okay, we'll be right back.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, we are back. So, one tip or piece of advice I'd like to offer new or expectant parents.
One piece. So I think that the best advice I can offer is to plan, but also to expect the unexpected. And I think that's the case throughout parenting, from pregnancy through labor and beyond. But there are certain things that you can plan for and understand, like what are the rights that I have at work? How much leave am I going to get? How much am I going to get paid? Is this doctor in network? Have I chosen a hospital to deliver that is covered by my insurance? But you might not be able to answer every question in advance, and that's okay. And the idea is just to know what you can know and keep track of what you can, and you can figure it out later.
That is excellent. All right. So I know that you also do some classes. Where can people find the Pregnancy Project and your classes and your general work?
Thank you for that question. We have a website, the pregnancyprojectny.com, and we are part of a law firm. So it's a part of our law firm's website. And we offer our classes sporadically at different locations around New York City and the Hudson Valley. So we really invite people to invite us to speak to groups of women or people who might be interested in this. And we keep our website updated with our classes and our Instagram as well.
Perfect. This is great. And I'm so glad that you do keep your Instagram up, because that's how I found you. And I'm so glad that you shared this somewhat overwhelming, maybe I'm speaking for myself, somewhat overwhelming information, because I'm guessing if it seems like a lot to me, it probably seems like a lot to others. So the fact that you're able to help one digest and decipher this, it's so important, especially at such a huge transition in one's life where there's already so much going on. So thank you for the work you do.
Thanks. And thank you for your great questions. And I would also just add that, this area of the law is complicated for lawyers as well. So I think there's no shame in being confused and asking for help, because it's really a question of just trying to understand as best you can. And oftentimes when women go to their employers, they might be the first person who's been pregnant in their office. And so the employers are confused too. So it's an area where there's a lot of information to be shared.
This is great. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Deb. Bye.
Bye.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.